guys, and welcome to the Tuskegee Airmen campaign. And I just want to introduce you to it. This is a campaign I made about 3 years ago. And just to explain how the journey started, I was a big fan, and still am, of 1946 or IL-2 Classic. And I remember going on a mission for it today and looking for a Tuskegee campaign. And, to my dismay, I couldn't find one, and that was kind of surprising because pretty much you can find a campaign or mission on any theater of the war at any point in the war, from everything from the Pacific to the European. There are aerial campaigns in every squadron, every unknown squadron that you've never heard of that you could find. And I was kind of surprised to find that I couldn't. There was no Tuskegee full campaign. I mean, I think there was maybe like a mission, maybe not even that. So I had just finished watching the movie, The Tuskegee Airmen, and then eventually Red Tails came out. I still think the original was better. I think it captured the spirit a lot better. And just thinking about everything that these guys went through, and the fact that they probably had the best fighter escort record of the war, and there is some historical debate as to whether they lost a bomber or not. They might have lost, one or two, according to some historians. But I think most would agree that they were the best fighter escort squadron in the war. And so, essentially, I wanted to honor these guys and create a campaign for them. So this is the start of that journey. I hope you guys enjoy this. So here we're at the Civilian Pilot Training Program, and just explain the history. I did do a lot of historical research for this. The Tuskegee Program was an Army Air Corps experiment to see if black aviators could perform the same duties, and I think the kind of purpose of the program, maybe nefariously according to the movie, was to prove that the black aviators could not do what white aviators could. And so if you kind of watch the movie, you know exactly that plays out very heavily. But going back to the first half of 1941, they had something called the Civilian Pilot Training Program. And unlike the movie, the training actually started while the aviator was in college. And so I think it was a voluntary thing. They wanted to increase our aviation candidates in case we actually decided to enter the war in Europe. And so that was sponsored by the Army Air Corps, right? In the movie, they show it at basic flight training, but I guess in reality, the First Lady, Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, visited the campus in Macomb County in Alabama, as part of the Rosenwald Foundation visit, and I guess she met this guy named Alfred Chief Anderson, who was a chief instructor pilot at the Civilian Pilot Training Program at this college. And so she went up, and that really changed the course of history. There's a photograph of the pair, and that went through newspapers all across the country. So that really propelled the Tuskegee program. Next to the institute, they were building a Army Air Field somewhere, I guess it was to the east. So that was in construction. You'll see that in the campaign. This is where you enter the story, or the pilot. And I want this to serve as kind of a journal. Everybody seems to be moving on to IL-2 Battle of Stalingrad, Battle of Moscow, and I really think that sim's just going to explode, and there's going to be tons of theaters, tons of aircraft. There's going to be American aircraft, British aircraft. I really think they're going to do well, and it's just going to continue to expand. Before I leave 1946, I'd like to document this journey, and I really want to have kind of a video journal of this because I think it's important. It was really fun to create, and I hope you guys enjoy this journey as much as I do. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So where the story picks up, you're a civilian pilot trainee, and this is your first solo. I had some issues with training aircraft like the Waco and some of the other ones, so I just put the Stearman in here. To my knowledge, there were some Stearmans in the U.S. that were used for pilot training, and I believe some were actually used in the Civilian Pilot Training Program. So let's get in the cockpit, and we'll do our first solo in the Stearman as the first chapter of this story. Alright guys, so welcome to the Stearman. Here we are in the cockpit with our instructor in the back, and I'll show you a view of the cockpit here. 1946 graphics, not bad. We'll get it started, and let me get the radiator full open here. And all we have to do is basically three laps around the airfield, and we'll come back in for landing. Obviously, we're not solo, but this is kind of simulating your first flight in the Stearman. Very basic flight training here, and very UK fashion. The propeller turns to the left, so. So we should need the left rudder in this, but all the aircraft in IL-2 1946 have right torque, so you always need right rudder no matter what, even in the dual engines. There's a powder trail or dust trail behind us. And again, I am using the Tiger sound mod. So we'll come in, we'll do 3 landings, and I'll show you that. Alright, so this is kind of our square pattern here. I'm cutting it in a little bit tight. I'm not a big fan of wide patterns. And this flight is just to get you acquainted with tail draggers and how to operate them. The Tiger Moth did not have a traditional tail wheel in the back. It's actually just a kind of a skid, I think is what it was called. Sorry about that, my track IR is acting up a little bit here. And again, one great thing about IL-2 is you can't slip, which I absolutely love. You do this in real aircraft all the time if you want to lose altitude. Here, we'll just pitch up just a little bit. There we go. Push the stick a little bit forward, and we'll do a touch and go here. I do love the sounds in this. Yeah, so one of the things I still have to remind myself is in tail draggers, when you land, you have to actually push the stick forward to keep the tail up. And it's kind of a reverse flare. The more the nose wants to raise, the more you have to push the stick forward. And that is very different than the nose wheel steering aircraft, because usually in your flare you continue to pull back as the aircraft loses airspeed. And as you can see from the cockpit, all the instruments do work. You got your airspeed slip and bank indicator there. I'm on a little bit of a slip here. And the needles are quote-unquote backwards. That I found out recently that caused some problems in American pilots flying Spitfires, because the bank indicator would turn opposite, or the ball, I guess, would turn opposite of the direction that you turned in. So that was a little bit off. I guess the top is the bank indicator, but the bottom portion is the slip indication, or the ball. Usually you have a ball in American aircraft, and that caused some confusion in the clouds for some early American Spitfire pilots. Alright, so here I'm coming in for the final landing here. And this thing is very light, does not like to slow down, so we will use brakes. And I like to pulse them and use differential braking. I'll taxi over to parking here. I love those dirt effects. Things are awesome. All right, so we'll taxi over to parking. This was the first mission here, and I'll go ahead and do the second flight. And in that one, we'll be in a biplane. At that point, we'll be actually enlisted in the Army Air Corps Basic Flight Training Program, and we'll fly over we'll do a short cross country to the Tuskegee Air Field, which is currently being constructed. So say goodbye to the steerman. And I'm sorry, did I say steerman on the last section? I actually meant the tiger moth. That's not what I was thinking of. This is supposed to simulate the steerman, although it's a Russian trainer that is in IL-2. But it's the closest that I could get to a kind of U.S. Military biplane. The steerman is the more famous of the two, but the Waco, which I've actually ridden in real life down in Florida, and there's a video on the channel about that. Actually, there's debate that the Waco may have actually trained more pilots than the steerman did, although it's more popular. But they were both pretty similar trainers, and that's what we're simulating here. So to show you our flight, we're going to be going over to the Tuskegee Air Field that's being built right now, and we'll fly over there. And we'll do kind of a short cross country, and then we'll come back and land it. Alright guys, I actually decided to skip that actual mission because all you do is fly over. You can kind of see the P-40s, which is really cool in front of the hangars. They're ready to go for training purposes. And we're actually going to move on to relocation to Tuskegee Army Air Field. So it's 10 miles to the west for conversion to operational types and training. And we're actually going to be flying cross country to the east. This is just some generic map that I was able to locate. Don't worry, things get better. We actually get into some really cool stuff. We transition to the P-40, and then we get deployed fairly quickly to the World War II theater of operations. So interestingly enough, the first class of cadets transferred from Moton Field to Tuskegee Army Air Field for their second phase of flight training. I guess they completed primary at Moton Field. And then about a month later, December 7th, 1941, the attack on Pearl Harbor happened and entered the United States into World War II. So that's so we're looking late December here, going into 1942. So we're going to relocate to the new airfield to complete intermediate training. You'll shortly transition to a high-performance trainer, and eventually you're assigned aircraft. You'll be expected to be polite, professional, and above all honorable in your conduct. So obviously the entire U.S. Army Air Corps in the United States was looking at these guys under a microscope, looking for any mistakes or their chance to discredit them. So they needed to be on their absolute best behavior. So true to life, some of the instructors were sent to pick up some of these guys in the training aircraft, and others actually had to drive or something like that. All right, so let's get into the flight. And there goes flight lead. I'll show you where we're going here over to the east. So we'll basically overfly the river, and there's a bridge as a checkpoint right about here, and then we'll make a landing at the airfield. You can see the Russian instrumentation here, which, you know, don't worry, you're only going to have to see that Russian instrumentation once in this campaign, because it's the only aircraft that we will be flying. And I apologize if there's any stutters or anything like that. It's just a symptom of 1946. And I love Tiger sounds for these aircraft. I have disabled some of the sounds, like I think flaps and brakes. I didn't particularly like those.
090, altitude 01.
So instead, I use the default for that. All right, I'm not going to bore you with the entire cross-country trip, but I will show you some sights, and then we'll land at the airfield. Really nice sun rays there. And this does feature high dynamic range, so it's a really beautiful scene. You can also see some nice early morning fog out in the distance. Pretty cool. Alright, just formed up on flight lead here. And one thing that's really cool is just the look of the water in this is really beautiful. So as we get over the water, we're about roughly halfway there. And this aircraft is armed. Only the Russians put live rounds in a training aircraft. I don't think our Stearmans or Wakos had a machine gun. And although you typically fly from the back seat solo on a lot of these training aircraft, to show you the student view, which was here. There's the bridge. That's kind of our, we're about a third of the way left to go, and where that plateau is up there, that's where the airfield is. Alright, you can see the airfield right there.
Heading 060, altitude 01.
I guess these guys are starting their descent here. One of the problems with the original IL-2 is whenever they would make altitude changes or heading changes, they would reduce their throttle to 0 and then go back up, and it would always cause problems with formation. I think HSFX, I'm using the 6.017, fixes that behavior, so they just maintain nice smooth throttle control throughout the process. As far as what I remember, HSFX fixes a lot of issues with the AI. Alright, so at this point I'm going to break off from the formation, and we'll call ATC for a landing.
You are cleared for landing.
What I like about this campaign is that you know, you start off as just a basic pilot, learning tail draggers and just learning how to fly, and then you just, you know, you gradually progress into more advanced aircraft. one technique I like to use in all tail draggers is to just keep a little bit of power on. If you're going to do a 2-point landing, it gives you airflow over the elevator and lets you control the descent a lot nicer. And this airplane specifically does have a tendency to bounce.
Return to base immediately. Over.
Oh, we had a crash. So apparently a couple...
Return to base immediately. Over.
Looks like a couple students crashed back there. That's not good. Alright, we'll taxi it over to parking. I'll show you the P-40s over there. A little taste of things to come. And one thing in tail draggers, if you didn't know, is you do want to zigzag back and forth so you can see where you're going. This biplane requires a lot of power to taxi. So you're just kind of zigzagging back and forth. It's kind of a peekaboo so you can see what's ahead of you. So again, this would be the student view with the instructor in the back here. And we'll just park it next to these P-40s here. One thing I remember about this Russian trainer, it does like to bounce quite a bit. Almost impossible to get into a 2-point landing configuration. So I'm just holding the left brake here and giving it differential braking. There we go. That is a beautiful airplane there. Alright, can't wait to fly that thing. Alright, so that was pretty much it for the introductory flight training with the trainers. And actually we still have an intermediate trainer that we're going to transition to. That'll be the AT6. And that'll introduce us to retractable gear, controllable pitch, propeller, as well as it's obviously a high-performance airplane. This is fabric and wood, and we're transitioning to all metal, very high horsepower aircraft. So hope you guys stick around, and we'll continue the flight.